She left, and it felt like your mother walking away. He ignored you, and somehow your father's silence echoed louder. But why does this pain feel so familiar from someone you just met? What if the people you're drawn to are simply reflections of the wounds you've never healed? By the end of this video, you'll see the patterns you keep repeating and the part of you that keeps choosing them. Most people think love is random, but trauma has a type, and it always remembers. You're not cursed. You're patterned. You meet someone who always seems to know what's best for you. They bring you soup when you're sick. They tell you what to wear when it's cold. They finish your sentences before you speak. They say it's love, and at first, you believe them. You're drawn to them because they feel safe, familiar. They take care of everything. They plan, they organize, they make decisions. And part of you relaxes like a child being carried. But slowly, the comfort turns into something else. Their care starts to feel heavy, like you owe them something. Their concern becomes correction. Their warmth starts to burn. They ask where you've been. They worry about your bad choices. They suggest, gently, who you should be around, what you should aim for, and who you should stop talking to. And each time they step in, it's framed as protection. You think, they just want what's best for me. But deep down, a quieter voice says something else. This doesn't feel like love. It feels like being owned. This is the first type of person you attract when you haven't healed your deepest wound. The caretaker who controls. They mirror your unmet need for nurturing, but they do it with a price tag, and often they appear when your inner child still believes love must be earned through obedience. You see, if you grew up in a home where love came with conditions, if you behave, I'll hug you. If you get good grades, I'll show up. If you don't cry, I won't be angry. Then part of you learned that care is a contract. So when someone steps in and begins caring for you, it feels like home. But it's not healing. It's repeating. In Jungian psychology, we call this a projection. You project your wounded need for parental care onto a partner, a friend, a boss, and they step into the role with unconscious precision. But here's the twist. They also carry their own unhealed wound. Most caretakers like this didn't feel needed as children, so now they seek broken people to fix, not to love, but to feel worthy. It becomes a silent transaction. I'll be the strong one if you stay small. And because your inner child still longs for that feeling of being seen, you comply. You hand them the steering wheel, you shrink your voice, you tell yourself it's love. But your body knows better. You start to hesitate before you speak. You check their mood before sharing news. You feel guilty for making decisions alone. And worst of all, you begin to lose the sound of your own voice. That's how the wound deepens, when someone's version of love becomes a leash. So why do you attract this person? Because a part of you still believes love must look like sacrifice. Because somewhere inside, you've mistaken control for safety. Because care feels more believable when it's a little bit painful, like it always was. The irony is, you may become addicted to this pattern. You crave their approval. You rely on their opinions. You ask for permission instead of giving yourself freedom. But eventually, something cracks. One day, you make a decision without consulting them. You say no without guilt. You take space, and they panic because you've stopped playing the role. You're no longer the child in need of rescue. You're someone who's learning to parent yourself. Healing begins not when you find someone to take care of you, but when you become the one who takes care of the part of you that keeps looking for a caretaker. It's not about rejecting love, it's about rejecting the version of love that demands your silence in return. When you start to reparent yourself by listening, validating, nurturing, and allowing, you stop chasing people who parent you with power. You no longer need their control because you've replaced it with something stronger, self-trust. This is the first mirror. It reflects the part of you that never felt fully held. But instead of healing it, you've been outsourcing the job to someone who needs to feel needed. It's not your fault. It's a pattern born from survival. But you don't need to survive anymore. You need to grow. And that starts by breaking the contract. You are not here to be managed. You are not here to obey someone else's idea of who you should be. You are here to come home to yourself, even if that means walking away from the one who always knew what was best. You talk, they nod. You share something personal, they change the subject. You send a message, they reply hours later. If at all, you try to connect, but it's like trying to hold smoke in your hands. They're there and not there, physically present, emotionally gone. You tell yourself they're just busy or not great with texting or need space, but inside it stings because no matter how much you reach out, they never really reach back. This is the second type of person you attract when your wounds are still open. The ghost who makes you feel invisible. At first, they're magnetic, charming in a quiet way, mysterious, self-contained, and part of you gets hooked, not just on who they are, but on the hope that maybe you will be the one to crack them open. You chase them gently. You make excuses for them. You give more than you get. Always one step behind, always one message deeper than they'll go. And what hurts most is that they never really hurt you directly. They just don't see you. You're not chasing a person. You're chasing a feeling. The feeling of being chosen. The feeling of finally being noticed. The feeling of mattering to someone who doesn't seem to need anyone. Because maybe, just maybe, if you can get love from someone who doesn't give it easily, it will finally mean you're lovable. But this isn't love. It's a reenactment, a psychological echo of being unseen. Let's go deeper. If you grew up in a home where emotional presence was scarce, where no one asked how your day was, where your feelings were too much, or where your achievements got more attention than your pain, then you internalized a core message. You must perform to be noticed, so you learn to become interesting, to become smart, to become helpful, to become anything that might make them look your way. And now, as an adult, you unconsciously seek out the one person in the room least likely to notice you because that's the one who feels familiar. You fall for the ghost because the ghost reminds you of home. In Jungian language, this is another form of projection. You project your unmet need to be seen onto someone who is emotionally unavailable, and you mistake their distance for depth. But here's the truth. They're not deep. They're disconnected, not just from you, but from themselves. They didn't learn emotional intimacy either, so when someone tries to get close, they disappear. Not because of you, but because presence feels dangerous to them. And yet instead of walking away, you try harder. You become more giving, more patient, more self-sacrificing. You convince yourself If I can just love them better, maybe I'll finally exist in their eyes. But love is not earned through disappearance, and your visibility should not depend on someone else's blindness. You deserve to be met, not tolerated. You deserve to be heard, not filtered. And most of all, you deserve to feel real. Here's the twist. The ghost doesn't just make you feel invisible. They reveal the part of you that still believes you are. They expose your oldest fear, that if someone truly sees you, they might still walk away. So instead, you settle for being half seen, half held, half loved, because half love feels safer than no love at all. But that's not safety. That's starvation. Healing means learning to stop chasing what won't stay. It means looking at the wound that taught you attention must be earned. It means grieving the years you spent proving you're worthy of someone's gaze. And then it means turning inward, to see yourself first, to become the one who notices your emotions, who listens when you're quiet, who sits with you in stillness without looking away. Because when you finally witness your own worth, you stop trying to earn it from someone who's never really there. The ghost teaches you something painful and profound, that your deepest wound is not about being alone. It's about being unseen in the presence of another. But you don't have to repeat that lesson. You don't have to convince anyone to see you. You just have to stop disappearing from yourself. And when you do, the ghosts will stop feeling like home and start feeling like what they always were, empty space. You share a dream. They raise an eyebrow. You speak with conviction. They ask if you've really thought it through. You glow with passion. They gently, subtly dim the light. They don't insult you. They don't yell. They don't tear you down. Instead, they plant small seeds of doubt, soft enough to pass as concern, but sharp enough to make you second-guess yourself. They say, I'm just trying to help. I don't want you to get hurt. I'm being realistic. And you, despite knowing your truth, begin to shrink. This is the third type of person you attract when your deepest wounds remain unhealed. The doubter who shrinks your power. They don't hate you. They're not jealous. But they mirror something inside you that still believes, maybe I'm not enough. It's not their criticism that hurts. It's that their voice sounds eerily familiar. Because once upon a time, someone else doubted you first. Maybe it was a parent who only praised perfection. Maybe it was a teacher who overlooked your effort. Maybe it was a friend who laughed when you dreamed too loud. Over time, you internalized a deep, invisible belief that to be powerful is to be exposed. That confidence invites correction. That boldness is dangerous. So now, even in adulthood, part of you seeks out someone who will reinforce that early message. Someone who mirrors your hesitation and calls it wisdom. You may even feel strangely safe around them. Their doubt confirms your caution. Their skepticism feels grounding. Their lack of belief matches your own. And that's the trap. They don't break you. They make you question if you were ever whole to begin with. They don't scream, you can't. They whisper, are you sure? And suddenly, your fire turns to smoke. In Jungian terms, this is a reflection of the inner critic, a shadow formed not from arrogance, but from chronic invisibility. This person becomes the voice of your past, the one who reminds you, softly and consistently, to stay small. But here's what's more painful. You may feel the urge to prove yourself to them. You show them your progress. You explain your decisions. You hope they'll say, "I'm proud of you." But they never do, because they weren't meant to believe in you. They were meant to mirror the part of you that doesn't yet believe in yourself. So why do you attract them? Because part of you is still waiting for permission to be big, to be bold, to be more than what they said you could be. But no one is going to hand you that permission slip. You have to write it yourself. And you can't do that while holding on to someone who only sees your limits. The healing begins the moment you stop defending your vision to people who were never meant to understand it. It begins when you recognize that doubt isn't guidance. It's a projection, their fear of risk, their discomfort with confidence, their own fractured self-image placed gently at your feet. And you don't have to pick it up. You don't have to explain your glow. You don't have to justify your fire. You don't have to ask someone smaller than you whether your light is too bright. You were never too much. You were simply surrounded by people who felt like less. When you begin to honor your instincts, to stand in your decisions, to trust the voice inside you more than the ones around you, you stop seeking the doubter, because there's nothing left in you that needs their reflection. You've outgrown their questions. You've stopped needing their belief, because now, finally, you believe yourself. This is the third mirror. It doesn't scream. It doesn't wound loudly. It simply echoes the part of you that doubts your own power. But you don't have to live in that echo chamber anymore. You were not born to second-guess your soul. You were born to become the person they once told you not to be. They look at you like you're the only person in the room. They listen so intently, it makes your chest tighten. They say things that no one has ever said to you before, things that make you feel chosen, special, finally enough. And then they vanish. A missed call, a short reply, a sudden distance you can't explain. Just when you lean in, they pull away. Just when you open your heart, they disappear, only to come back a few days later, full of charm, full of warmth, as if nothing ever happened. And you forgive. You justify. You wait. Because when they're present, it feels like love. And when they're gone, it feels like you've done something wrong. This is the fourth type of person you attract when your deepest wounds are still bleeding. The lover who keeps you starving. They don't reject you outright. They keep you close enough to hope, but far enough to hurt. They breadcrumb affection, and you unknowingly chase the crumbs like they're a feast. You tell yourself they're just going through something. You convince yourself you're being too needy. You shrink your needs to match their inconsistency. And without realizing it, you're back in a place you swore you'd never return to. Longing, waiting, performing for attention. Why does this feel so familiar? Because this is the emotional rhythm you were raised on. Maybe your caregiver loved you deeply, but inconsistently. Warm one day, cold the next, available until they weren't, present until their own pain pulled them away. And as a child, you blamed yourself. You thought, if I were more lovable, they'd stay. If I were quieter, they wouldn't leave. If I were better, they'd come back. So now, as an adult, you seek out a partner who recreates the same emotional pattern. Someone whose love feels just out of reach. Someone who keeps you hungry enough to stay. In Jungian terms, this is the projection of the abandonment wound, the aching, unresolved fear of being left. Not just physically, but emotionally. The wound of unpredictability. of never knowing when love will vanish. And that wound doesn't just live in your memories, it lives in your nervous system. That's why their silence feels like suffocation. That's why your joy disappears the moment they go quiet. That's why your entire mood rises and falls with their attention. It's not about them. It's about the part of you that still believes love must be earned through suffering. But here's the truth they mirror. They don't love you in halves because you're unworthy. They love in halves because they're fractured. They fear full intimacy. They were taught to disappear when things get too real. They were loved conditionally too. And now they repeat that script with you. Their inconsistency isn't mystery, it's immaturity. Their withdrawal isn't deep, it's a defense. But you're not here to beg for breadcrumbs. You're not here to relive the emotional starvation of your childhood. You're not here to wait by a phone like a child waiting by the door. You are here to unlearn the lie that love must feel like longing. Healing begins when you stop chasing their return and start grieving what never fully arrived. It begins when you stop trying to fix their absence and start questioning why you call it love. It begins when you finally say, I deserve consistency. I deserve presence. I deserve peace. And then, most painfully, most powerfully, you walk away from the one who only shows up when it's convenient, not because you don't love them, but because you finally love you more. This is the fourth mirror. It reflects the part of you that fears being left, the part that believes affection must be chased, earned, justified. But you don't have to prove your worth to anyone who makes you feel forgotten. You don't have to keep loving someone who only loves you when it's easy. Real love doesn't starve you. It nourishes, it stays, it sees you, even when you're messy, tired, unfiltered. And anything less than that isn't love. It's a lesson. You laugh too loudly and they flinch. You share something messy and they go silent. You show up as your full, honest self and their face says it all. Discomfort, judgment, cold withdrawal. They never tell you to stop. They don't have to. Their body does the speaking. Their silence teaches you where the walls are, and suddenly you begin to edit yourself. You soften your voice. You clean up your truth. You play the role that's easier to accept and hide the parts that feel too much. This is the fifth type of person you attract when your most hidden wound is still bleeding. The mirror who makes you ashamed to be you. They don't yell. They don't control. They simply reflect back your deepest fear, that being full of yourself is somehow wrong. They mirror the shame you carry like invisible weight. Shame for needing, shame for wanting, shame for feeling too deeply, for thinking too much, for simply existing outside the lines. And the tragedy is, you start to believe them. But they didn't create that shame. They only awakened it. It started long ago. Maybe it was the parent who said, "Stop crying every time you expressed pain." Maybe it was the teacher who rolled their eyes when you were excited. Maybe it was the sibling who called you dramatic or weird when you were just being yourself. Over time, you learned to hide, to adapt, to dim your light, to make others comfortable. And so now, when you meet someone who subtly punishes authenticity, you feel something familiar. Not good, not right, just familiar. In Jungian thought, shame lives in the shadow. The part of us we exile for being unacceptable, not because it is dangerous, but because we feared it would make us unloved, so we pushed it down. And in doing so, we created a false self, a version of me that was easier to like, easier to digest. But the cost was high. We became strangers to our real selves. The mirror doesn't scream. They don't insult. But they withdraw when you show too much truth. And in that withdrawal, your shame wakes up and it whispers, tone it down. Don't make them uncomfortable. Be smaller. And so you live in fragments. You share, then apologize. You feel joy, then question it. You speak, then regret your voice. You live not as a full human, but as a performance, a constant curation, a quiet, polite version of someone who is dying to be real. But here's what the mirror can never take from you: your right to exist without apology, your right to take up space, your right to be complicated, loud, deep, and fully you. Healing begins when you stop asking, is this too much? And start asking, why have I made myself so little for so long? It begins when you notice the shame, and instead of shrinking, you sit beside it. You say, I see you, but I don't serve you anymore. And eventually, you do something radical. You stay fully yourself, even when someone pulls away. You stop chasing approval. You stop adjusting your tone. You stop managing their reactions like it's your job to make them comfortable. Because it's not. Their discomfort is not your shame. Their silence is not your fault. Their distance is not your truth. This is the fifth mirror, the one that shows you what you're still afraid to be, not because it's unlovable, but because it was never welcomed. But now you can welcome it, not with permission, not with approval, but with love, your own. You don't have to ask anymore, am I too much? You get to declare, I'm enough, exactly as I am, even in my fullness. And anyone who needs less is free to leave. What if the people who hurt you weren't mistakes? What if they were mirrors, not to punish you, not to break you, but to reveal what you've been carrying silently for years? The controller didn't steal your freedom. They showed you where you'd never claimed it. The ghost didn't abandon you. They revealed the part of you that already felt forgotten. The doubter, the avoidant, the quiet judge. Each of them was holding up a piece of your story you hadn't yet faced. And once you see that, something shifts. You stop asking, why did they do this to me? And start asking, why did I believe I deserved it? Because that's where healing begins. Not in changing other people, but in changing what you tolerate in the name of love, what you chase in the name of worth, what you silence in the name of peace. You are not broken for attracting these patterns. You are human, and humans repeat what is familiar until familiarity is no longer enough. The goal isn't to cut everyone off. It's to become so aware of your own wounds that no one can use them against you anymore. So you begin to observe, to pause before reacting, to notice when someone feels too much like home, but not the kind of home that heals, the kind that hurts. And then with clarity, not rage, you choose differently. You don't run, you don't attack. You simply stop giving your most sacred self to people who can't hold it. Because now you can. You hold yourself. You see yourself. You trust yourself. And in that mirror, finally, you no longer see the wound. You see the one who made it through.